Are you looking to create timeless beauty in your garden? It's always a great idea to add roses. At Heirloom Roses, they know that the best roses start with the best roots, which is why they only hand propagate own root roses. These own root roses will outlive and outshine grafted roses from the big box stores, resulting in stronger disease resistance and a longer lifespan, and stunning blooms that are always true to the variety. Heirloom Roses is located in Oregon, is a family-owned business that grows over 900 varieties of roses for gardening zones 3 through 10. Use their great search tool to narrow down your choice based on zone, fragrance, growth habit, color, and more. Plus, they have a 1-year guarantee, so if your rose doesn't thrive in its first year, they will replace it for free. Heirloom Roses is also committed to producing only disease-free plants and genetically test all of their roses to ensure the cleanest plant material possible. You can have peace of mind knowing your newest rose will be healthy and ready to thrive and blossom for years to come. As a special offer for our listeners, Heirloom Roses is offering a 20% discount off all roses using Backyard20 code at checkout now through September 30th, 2023. And since they ship all year round, you can choose the perfect ship date for your garden. It's time to experience growing roses the way nature intended, on their own roots. Visit them at heirloomroses.com to find your next rose today and take 20% off with Backyard20.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
All right, everybody. Today we were talking before the show, and Leonard had the great idea of why don't we talk about harvesting and preserving? So it is that time of year. It is the reason for the season, right? So,
and some of
yeah. I personally stayed up late last night canning and drying tomatoes. I'm trying drying this year. So we'll see how that goes. I'm staying true to my word. Are you going to do any drying this year, Batavia?
Drying tomatoes? Like for sun-dried tomatoes?
Yeah, but not in the sun, in the dehydrator.
That is so wild.
What's wild about it?
This week I made this recipe like it's not exactly ceviche, because the shrimp are cooked, and it called for sun-dried tomatoes. And I'm like, I started in my mind tasting sun-dried tomatoes. I'm like, I'm not crazy about them when I think back to having them in dishes. But before I got there, I thought to myself, like, do I have any like legit videos where people are actually drying tomatoes not in the sun? Anyway, It's weird that you bring this up just a day later.
Well, that's what I'm doing. We'll see how it works. So there are a lot of, I guess, what is it, nuances into harvesting and stuff, especially like between eating fresh and preserving, I would say. So, I mean, everybody does the tomato, right? Do you want to cover off on that, or should we skip the tomato?
Just make it brief,
okay.
I think.
So, well, first of all, do you harvest your tomatoes when they're perfectly ripe, or how do you do it?
I typically wait until they get probably color all around. If I plan on slicing tomatoes, like, for a salad, I want it to get pretty ripe. If I've had any kind of bug damage or anything like that, I'll take them early. But if I could wait until everything like gets to the ripeness on the vine, I would. That's no way near short. There's no way this is going to be short. Let's skip tomatoes.
It's too late now. We already cracked that open. No, I mean, for me, I do a number of things. I mean, first of all, I'll harvest some green if I want fried green tomatoes, but that says in itself, which we eat a fair amount of. But we also do, like, for instance, I have a raccoon that's been visiting my garden. So as soon as I'm seeing some decent color, just like you said, like not totally red, but like, I guess that like yellow, orangish, I've been going ahead and pulling them and just letting them ripen inside because it pisses me off when I come outside and have a nice big half-eaten tomato hanging off my vine. So I've been doing that, but I kind of go in between the canning. When I'm canning, though, I do prefer to get them as close to ripe off the vine as I can, first and foremost. So I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah, I think that the shelf life of tomatoes can vary quite a bit. So if you're taking them early and then letting them ripen inside versus some other vegetables where, you got to kind of get those things preserved pretty close to your harvest. You could have, in some cases, if it's in a cool place, tomatoes for up to a couple of weeks even. Especially if they started off, just blushing when you pull them off. One thing to note for me, and I'm planning on using it, my basement is much cooler even than my main floor. So that's where I plan on storing things that I'm not ready to use yet or not ready to preserve. Sometimes I leave things on the vine because I feel like, all right, you got a better chance at not spoiling. Because I've thrown away over the years things like tomatoes that have started to get kind of moldy. You may not see some imperfection where, there's an opportunity for it to start to spoil on the counter. Ugh.
Yeah, I've canned 10 cans of tomatoes so far. And what I'll say, the way I handle the harvesting for those beforehand is, we'll start getting them. And I don't like to do like one can at a time. I like to do minimum 3 to 4 cans, which is, truth be told, is what I'm doing anyways, is just kind of the minimum. But I'll go and I'll start collecting them. And because we do determinate tomatoes, they come on fast and heavy. So it's like every day we're getting a handful. But when I see them really starting to come on fast, I'll pull them when they're a little bit green, and then let them ripen inside and keep pulling until I get like a big bucket or basket full to where I can go ahead and do what I need to do with them. But I want them all to be ripe when I go to can them. So that's like the important distinction for that.
Agreed.
So, and just so everybody knows, we're working on a bit of a delay today. So if there's gaps, we'll try and take them out. But if there is a little gap, that's why. Cucumbers, that's another big preserver. When do you harvest those? Do you like them early or late, or like perfect?
I want to harvest them early, but I typically harvest them pretty late.
Okay.
Not by plan, just by, they end up getting away from me.
And do you can?
Cucumbers are probably the crop that I waste the most of in my garden.
Really?
Yeah, I think between what kind of gets away and has gotten, too ripe, overripe on the vine, and then every year I try to be better, but I'll have a basket because, a lot of times you're 10, 12, cucumbers off of your plants, plural plants at a time. And so I'll bring them in. I should be bringing them in and basically getting them preserved then, but I don't. And so then they start to even ripen more sitting on the counter or in a basket. That's the reason why I say I feel like I end up throwing away quite a bit of those.
Yeah, we do. It's about the same thing. I've found that if I get them a little bit early, like they don't grow anymore, so they don't get any bigger. But I find that they last a little bit longer. And so I think it's funny, we talked about it this year. And we're like, let's not do a whole lot of pickles. So we're going to do like maybe 2 or 3 jars. That would be like the max we would go through in a whole year. And I like to get them a little bit smaller. So they're a little bit more crisp. They hold up when we're canning and stuff like that. So I figured out, actually last night is funny because we're about to can some pickles. And I was like, well, let me see how it's going to go down. So I saw a pickle or a cucumber that wasn't quite ready to harvest. Like I could, but I wanted to see how big it would get. And overnight it like doubled in size. So I was like, okay, now I've kind of got the situation under control. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, I've all but decided to only do refrigerator pickles. I bought, so that's the knockoff Clausen recipe. I bought some Clausen pickles. They were so salty, like over the winter coming into spring. And so I still have the jar, and I'm just like, all right, I'm going to compare once I make mine. This batch that I made last year was a little bit saltier than I like. So I'm hoping that, I don't experience that again. But I don't know. I think I had like 6 jars, like 6 quart-sized jars of pickles, or refrigerator pickles. And they lasted through, like I ate the last jar like in February or something.
Yeah.
So I feel like if I can get, and they keep, they're in the back of the refrigerator. Are they as great as they were, in that first month? Maybe not, but still suitable. I like the crunchier pickle more so, and it's easier for me just to put them in the refrigerator. I still have a couple of jars that I process through water bath canning, and it's just, there are like 1 or 2 things that I like that kind of pickle for. Yeah. But like 1 or 2. So.
That's how we are. We used to can a lot of them, and now it's just kind of like, I don't know, maybe the novelty wore off a little bit, but we don't eat pickles anywhere near as much as we used to. So we just kind of decided it's time to move on from that. And we come and go as we need to.
It was an entry into preserving beyond like freezing. It was entry into like, canning for me in particular. And so, it's like, oh, I'm canning more pickles. And I enjoyed them, all things considered. But the way I was doing it, like, the texture just wasn't what I was looking for. And when I came across this refrigerator pickle, which we've heard a bunch of like refrigerator pickling, for cucumbers, for jalapenos and so on. But when I realized that first kind of going from fall into winter, how long they lasted in the refrigerator, I'm like, this is the way. And even if I don't get a full year's worth, so to speak, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. My wife, I think she ferments them. And then I think we water bath them. But I'm pretty sure, because you buy Clausen's in the grocery store in the refrigerator section, they may actually be refrigerator pickles from the factory. I never thought about it that way. Maybe that's the trick. I'll have to look.
Maybe there's some internet search I can do. I think I kind of assumed that, I guess that just totally makes sense. But anywho, I don't want to get in bed with the fermenting of the cucumbers when I know that I can get through, again, 6-8 months of refrigerator pickles. And I've made the space for it. I have a second refrigerator downstairs. Lord knows if my old refrigerator upstairs, my main refrigerator can hold on 1 more year. I should have the space to store, like, if I can get 8-9 jars, I'd be sitting pretty.
Yeah, and we're not doing spears either. So, we're going to do like sandwich slices. I don't know what you call them, sliced pickles. We're going to do those this year, I think, instead of spears. Sometimes it's easier to choke down. You know what I'm saying?
I feel like, like when you remember, we used to have meetings for work and stuff, and, it'd be a box lunch. They bring, a sandwich and a pickle on the side. Like, I almost never eat a pickle like that. Like, if you go get somewhere, like if you go to a burger joint or something, they put the pickle. Like, no, I want the slices all the time. Every now and again, I like a whole pickle. But you got to get those small. You got.
Now I'll tell you this: if you serve me a spear, like a pickle spear on the side, and I eat it, and you see me eat it, I'm hungry, and you didn't give me enough regular food. That's why I'm eating it. So that's just all there is to it. Shout out to everybody who does the same thing, because I know that I'm not the only one. There's times when you got to do what you got to do. Just like eating that little garnish on the side of the plate. You see me eating the garnish, it means 1 or 2 things. Either I'm hungry or the food was really unhealthy and I felt like I needed something clean to put in my body. But, so it's when you go through and we're harvesting with the mindset of preserving, you do want to get peak ripeness, but we also just know that, like, if you get it from the grocery store, and a lot of people will learn to can by buying stuff from the grocery store, that stuff is green harvested, which means it's just harvested way early and ripened up afterwards. So you can do the same thing. Now, here's the key: handling the produce once you get it. That's something that I need to work on.
What do you mean handling?
So, for instance, I'll be out in my garden and I'll get lazy and I'll have my basket sitting there and I'll walk to another garden bed, and especially with like a tomato, and I'll just like toss it in and I'll bruise it up, and then I go to take the skins off the tomato or something, and it's just like this soft, gushy spot, and what it can really do is encourage premature rot inside of that produce. So, just do yourself a favor. And then, can peppers be the same way? I don't know.
Yeah, if you nick a pepper or something, I've had like half a dining room table, like with a bath towel laid on it, and then the peppers laid out, trying to give them some air, and then I'll come back over the course of the days that I'm, working with them, and everything looks great at first, but then you can look to see, like the brown spot, but you can see where it's been nicked. So obviously peppers are a little bit mightier than tomatoes, but
now
absolutely.
The question I have, and I'm sure everybody else's mind, is
eat that thing, just go ahead and eat it.
What color bath towel are you using to lay your peppers on?
Weird question. Weird question. The answer is brown.
I like it.
One of my bathrooms has brown accents, and so as I've refreshed the towels over the years, the old kind of, go into the swimming pool towel. Yep, I'm absolutely putting my peppers on on towels that I've gone to the swimming pool with.
Okay, now that the weird question's out of the way, we can move on. Do you
or a burnt orange? That's a really, really old bathroom scheme color palette, and those towels are really, really old. I can't throw that kind of stuff away.
Or like old school or old people?
Like old as in how many years I've had it, but still in pretty good condition. I'm talking like a decade or older. I haven't had an orange bathroom in like 15 years or something. But those towels are a heavy
My wife
duty.
keeps telling me that orange is my favorite color, and it's not. But, what does she know? I'm an independent man.
It's burnt orange, though, just to clarify.
Excuse me. Burnt orange. Not carrot orange, not orange, but burnt orange. Okay.
Yeah. Nope.
Do you can your peppers at all, other than jalapenos?
Well, the story with jalapenos is I'm giving it up. I'm so mad at myself. I had a jar of store-bought jalapenos, and I left them on the counter. And then I looked, and they were kind of gray, and I opened them up. Like, they were already open. I left them on the counter for, like, probably a couple of weeks. And when I opened it up, I heard this. And it started to spoil. It was like 3/4 of the way full. So I went in my cabinet. I'm like, this is the last one. The taste that I want is the taste that is in the store-bought canned jalapenos. It's not too vinegary. Maybe there's a hint of sweetness. But I can't get there with what I can at home. So I've resigned to the fact that I'm just going to be buying canned jalapenos from the store, and I'll use them for other things.
What about bell peppers and stuff?
I do. The only one that somewhat works is, I can't think of the way that it's called something, but it's like carrots, jalapenos, onions.
Yeah.
I could tolerate that.
That's too
when
much
I can
work
it that
for
way.
me. What about like bell peppers and stuff? Have you ever tried to can those?
It's one of my favorites. I have, and I'm in like year 2 of it, 3, maybe this would be year 3, maybe. And so I've canned them using like a pickling solution, which I do want to comment about. Oh my gosh, how many more things can I pickle?
Yeah.
But my favorite way is like a roasted bell pepper. And so I've done that where I've actually frozen the jar or in like a container or whatever, but I've also pressure canned it. And it's tricky.
Roasted bell peppers pressure canned?
Yes.
Does it taste good?
Yes.
Okay.
But you have some siphoning where some of the liquid escapes from the jar. Like that's pretty common from what I've come across, what I've done and what I've read. And so all in all, I think the rule is if it's above whatever you're canning, I don't want to get too technical with this, it's safe, or if you've only lost like 1/4 of the liquid, yada, yada, yada. that's one of those things. It's kind of like spinach. By the time you start canning it, like you're like, oh, I have 100 peppers, and you look at it's like it's 3 jars.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Because that stuff kind of shrinks down. That's the downside. So I played around last year in particular with pressure canning some jars. Then basically after they're roasted, instead of pressure canning them, freezing them. The only thing I can say for sure is the size of jars probably need to be smaller. Because I was doing like a pint jar. And as much as I want to, I don't remember to go through the entire pint jar. And I think the shelf life of this product, once it's open, is probably shorter than a lot
they
of
have
other
those
things. Again, I'm only a couple of years in. Don't hold me to like
they
all
have
of these
those
things.
small. So the way I look at it is like a canned bell pepper. Let me phrase it right. A can of roasted bell peppers, because that's what I'm curious in, is more like a delicacy, right? And so they have those. I don't know what size they are. They're like quarter pints or something. They're really super tiny. And some of them are even like rounded shape, which are cool looking. I've thought about, I haven't thought about, I've looked into getting those cans and doing it, because that's something to me that depresses me. Is you'll come in and you'll have this basket full of vegetables. And like you said, you walk away with like 3 cans and you're like, okay, that wasn't really worth the effort. But if you put it into smaller things and you treat it like that, I think it could work out in my favor, but those small cans are outrageously priced, so I have not really jumped in.
Buying roasted peppers from the store is outrageously priced. It's like a mortgage payment. So one, they're expensive in the stores. 1, 2, I've water bath canned in like the 8-ounce jars. I don't know if it's deemed safe to can in that small of a jar with pressure canning. So the roasted peppers, it's recommended that you pressure can those, not water bath those, right? Because you're taking all the liquid and all of the oils from the peppers and all of that. You can actually pour water on top instead too if you want, or maybe in addition to. But anywho, I haven't crossed the bridge on how I'm going to do that this year. Ideally, I'm going to start with making my pepper tomato sauce, and then with what I have left, I'll decide how I'm going to can it. The consistency of a roasted sweet pepper, it stays intact more so when you pressure can it versus when you freeze it. There is more water content when you freeze it. And just a reference, like think about if you're like a beef eater, Italian beef, like they put sweet peppers on it, and most times they're green. It's a big thing in Chicago, I'm sure in a bunch of other places. So that's the thing I'm going after.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but roasted,
okay, I'll send you a picture. I do roasted red peppers for things like pasta. I put them in salads. I love them. But to be quite frank, I don't have the discipline to remember I opened the jar. And it's like, oh, you ate off of it twice. And it's like a week later, you're like, oh, that looks kind of funky. Maybe not a week later, more like a month later. Like it's in the back of the refrigerator.
Well,
how that goes.
And speaking of looking funky, we do need to spend a decent amount of time talking about canning safety and stuff like that, I feel like. Because we have some cans. We did some canning last year. We had some tomatoes we canned, and one of the cans, I'm trying to think of what happened. The top didn't seal. No, the top did seal, but when we opened it, there was mold inside. So there was obviously like a leak or something. And so we wrote on the top of the rest of the cans from that batch, like check before use. Right. But the thing is, and I can't ever stress this enough, and I feel like every year we need to say this because we do get new listeners all the time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Sorry. Good night.
Did you stutter on that one?
No, I stumbled across. I'm pretty clumsy if you haven't.
So botulism is a real thing, and you cannot tell by the look or the smell if you have it. So some things will get darker in the can, and when you're canning these things, you can read about it. It'll say like, hey, if it gets darker, it's okay, this, that, or the other. But I would definitely use visual cues as like a point to be cautious. But always check and make sure that things are sealed all the way by all means. And it was like last night, I told my wife, I was like, I'm gonna can some tomatoes tonight. And she's like, all right. And I was like, you don't have to help me or anything. I'll just do it. And so I spent the time as everything was getting ready. I was like cleaning the kitchen, and boy, I got some serious brownie points for that. But, I told her, I was like, I'm not cleaning it for you. I'm cleaning it so I don't kill us. Because you've got to have like a clean, sterilized space. And when I say sterilized, you don't have to get out there and like steam clean stuff, but you definitely, bust out the Clorox wipe or something and wipe down the counter and just try and keep it generally clean. I know, and the reason why I say this on here, and I have no problem saying this, because I know everybody listening to this show right now at this time of year's cabinets are probably have some kind of produce that's been sitting up there. We have it all laid out. It's hard to manage. And invariably what's going to happen is you're going to have something that maybe you put in a dish or something that's gone bad. Have you experienced that, Batavia?
Yeah, I was in the cabinet looking for the other jar of jalapenos. I'm like, what is that smell? And I'm just like, I don't know what it is, but it's terrible. It was actually a store-bought bag of potatoes, and there was only one potato that was rotten in there. And so I ended up having to take, but potatoes are the worst. I love them
when they go bad.
But they're the worst once they go bad. I basically had to wash like all of the other potatoes because I know this is nasty, trigger warning. The liquid from the rotten potato had gotten on these other potatoes. So even when I tossed that bad potato, it still had that stench. So I'm going to go a step before young Ben. And this is a thing that keeps it straight in my head, and it helps me not feel so overwhelmed. If you're new to preserving, or if you're new to the volume that you're preserving, for me, I'm not one that's in the kitchen cooking every single day. So I think it's probably easier for people that are commonly in the kitchen. Like, you basically can adapt your systems. I had to create systems that help me keep straight what I'm bringing in from the garden. Kind of what I'm eating fresh, like feeling like I have enough to can. And Ben is great about small batch canning, like all of that. Like, how do I keep track? How old is this group of tomatoes?
Yeah.
Has this been, were these harvested like 3 days ago or 10 days ago? Right. So I say all of that to say, gosh, this is where a system is your friend. And a part of that system, I'm probably in month 6 of this, but is to make sure that for me, my general first level of my house is clean. Right. So, and I'm talking about like, not sweeping things under the, the couch or anything, but that I have some order throughout that floor so I can keep track of what I'm bringing stuff into the house every day at this point. And so it's really, really important to me because, and I'm stressing this because I've tried to preserve not under those guidelines, and there is more waste, there is more mess, waste as in, throwing away things, mess as in like just mess around. And that's just not safe, to Ben's point. Yeah. When it comes to being sanitary.
It's like, I'm just talking about countertops. Any tool that you use, anything like that, wash it, get it taken care of. Especially last night because I was canning tomatoes, you've got to blanch them and then peel them. So it was like I had to clean the sink out completely. But you need to have everything available so you're not fumbling around. I've done canning before, like the sink's full of dishes, and it's just like, it's a nightmare. You don't want that dirty water splashed around because, believe it or not, like once you get your can sterilized, which we'll go over in a second, one drop of dirty dishwater will spoil that whole can, or if you had some kind of big batch of something going, like if you're making jelly or something, jam, whatever, you could spoil that whole batch. And that's not something you want to do. And the thing is like botulism and, food poisoning and stuff, like I said, you can't see it. So you don't know. So it's like, just take the time and make sure the counters are wiped down and the sink's empty and you have your workspaces all set up and everything else, because it's going to help you be more efficient. And what it'll end up doing is it'll make it a much more pleasant process. And if you're like me, you get some brownie points, so it works out pretty well. Which I hate cleaning the kitchen too. It's like the worst job on the planet, but it kind of helps out. And a lot of the people listening to this show probably, I would assume, are cooking most of their meals and stuff like that. We're not eating out as much as some people because you got to consume the stuff that you're growing. So there's added mess into it all.
Yeah, I have a small kitchen, all things considered, and my dream is to have like a clear countertop, and I've had clear countertops for a long time, and then not. Like, I'm still rebounding from the pandemic years, but this weekend I started with the whole, like, my air fryer I keep out in the corner on the counter, and I put it back in the cabinet, and I say, I'm going to be using it less as I look forward to, like, the way I'll be cooking, but also I'll pull it down. Like, I generally have a rule of thumb where dishes can be in the sink, but if I'm cooking, I clean the kitchen and clean, the dishes. Like, I don't cook with dirty dishes in the sink. That's just, again, it's a rule of thumb for me. There are dirty dishes right now in the sink, but I ain't cooking. So that's the reason why. But I think it feeds into, like, these habits, even if it's just for this period, lead to making it easier. I can see where that tool, that debubbler tool, is, because I don't have to move around the bananas and the bread that's on the counter right now. Right. So all of those things matter. And I think that generally it'll make the experience less stressful. There's less of a stress and a strain around, is this food going to be okay? And then obviously it feeds into safety, as young Ben has described.
It's super important. And the same with your produce. I mean, before you get into it, like last night I was going through, and so I got pretty lucky. My wife, she took a lot of the tomatoes, and we have these little baskets, and she was putting them in the refrigerator. And what I learned was one basket's about 1 1/4 jars. So I can pull them out, and I know. But as I was going through the tomatoes, I make sure to go through and look for anything with blemishes, anything with insect damage, anything that shows signs of like age, like excessive age and rotting. And you have to call them out. As bad as it sucks, because last year was real bad. I had a stink bug problem, and they were just, all of my tomatoes had damage. And so as I went through them, I was calling them, and I thought I had about 8 cans to do, and it turned out I only had 2 when I got down to it, because that was the produce that was like good enough to can. So moving forward, I knew that kind of helped me as well to kind of stay on top of my pest management at the same time, so I don't have that issue again, because that's not something I want to deal with. That was a depressing moment. So I was happy to say yesterday I only had to call out 2 tomatoes because of any kind of like insect damage, and I don't even think it was insect damage. It was just damage to the tomato itself. Ding.
Yeah, here with a whole sermon. All of those things matter. I also believe, though, it's counter to what we were saying earlier. The sooner you get to the stuff, the better off you'll be. So if you could cut down the time that you kind of let things sit, I think the better off you're going to be, the less waste. I fight this every single year. I fight this when I'm just grocery shopping. Like, my great aunt told me years ago, you probably buy too much food. It wasn't a loving kind of, elder kind of way where they say what they want to say. And that voice, excuse me, that statement in her voice sticks with me, because she was right. It's like, oh, I bought half a loaf of bread, and I get home, I'm like, oh shoot, there's already half a loaf of bread. And I live by a grocery store list, but that's beside the point. It's important to me that I kind of manage the waste. I'm going to waste stuff. It's going to happen. Things are going to go bad. It's going to happen. But this is the time where I need to be on. Like, I'm making a concerted effort to do the best that I can. And when stuff goes bad, I don't beat myself up, but I do know that I'm absolutely capable of it if I don't stay on top of it.
Yeah, and it's super important to kind of stay on top of it all the time. And you get a canner and it's really big, and the goal is obviously to have that thing just jelly jam packed full of cans. But like I said, and Batavia alluded to earlier, like I would suggest that people kind of get comfortable with the idea of like small batch canning, you know, doing 3 cans at a time or something, like 3 jars at a time, whatever, however you want to refer to it. But that'll help you stay on top of it more. It is more work. And I've gone back and forth about when I do it. And I actually like to do my canning at night because everything's kind of done in the house and I can kind of focus on that. You know, my son's chilling or going to bed even. And like, that's kind of like my time to kind of go in there. And I'm not really focusing on TV or anything. I'm just listening to some music or the Backyard Gardens podcast. I sit in my house and listen to myself. I hate the sound of my voice, but I'll do stuff like that and it'll help me focus and just kind of stay on track because it's a lot like, you know, I was talking to my wife last night and I equated it cooking like, an 8-course meal. You know, you just got to be focused on like all these different steps going on. And like last night I was dehydrating and canning at the same time. So I was kind of had a couple different things going on and it worked out. I'm pretty sure, I think that the tomatoes just finished dehydrating. I got to go check them after we're done. But that was my goal. So just so you guys know, and so you know, Batavia, you know how I'm growing that dwarf geranium kiss tomato this year? And it's supposed to be a small plant with a full-size tomato. Well, that's not the case. It's a small plant with, I'd say, a large cherry tomato. And so I can't eat that many tomatoes like that. So we decided that we were going to have to force ourselves to incorporate dried tomatoes into our diet to see how this works out for us. So that's what we're doing now is just kind of, we're going to take all of our cherry sized tomatoes and dry them this year and see if we can figure out recipes and stuff to cook with it.
I have a dehydrator. A listener of the show recommended one some years back. You remember, like in year 3, I opened it. Anywho, I've been using it. I used it, quite a bit last year. But some years before that, before the dehydrator that I have now, in another unit, I dehydrated cherry tomatoes. I'm pretty sure I cut them in half and then dehydrated them and then added them to a mason jar with some olive oil, some good olive oil. And I kept them in the refrigerator just because I get nervous about leaving things on the counter. My kitchen gets so hot. And I mean, if you're not conscious about or concerned about the oil, that's a pretty good way. I probably wouldn't do more than a couple batches of that. To your point, like cherry tomatoes can put on a lot of fruit. But for the dehydrating bit, I also have one of those vacuum sealers.
Yeah.
And I think I told you I'd done mushrooms, which I didn't grow, but done mushrooms and then made mushroom powder and dehydrated. And it seems to have it absolutely works. It's sealed, it's kept. So that same thing could happen. I mean, there's a whole community when it comes to dehydrating too. So yeah, I mean, I think that, I may join you and try some dehydrated tomatoes. I just don't know, because this is a balance too. I just don't know how much I'd use them as much as I love tomatoes. Well, that's what we
kind of came up with. And so I went and I think it was I found a list of 16 recipes on food.com or something crazy like that. And I sent it to my wife and I was like, here, save the website and we'll just work our way through this list and see, I mean, I don't want to waste the stuff, but going on to sterilization of the jars and stuff, I mean, it's pretty simple. And this is where you have multiple steps. You need to boil your jars and your the lid, not the ring, but the lid for 10 minutes before you do it. So that will help sterilize it and everything like that. And some people will do it. I've read that you can do it in your dishwasher. If you do them by themselves on the highest temperature setting, I've heard that will work. But we just kind of pre-wash them and then we just boil them in the boiling water. And then I'll turn around and use that boiling water in the pressure canner. So it's already heated up and ready to go for the canning process. So it kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone. And if I have anything left over, Then I'll take it out and I'll pour it on like a weed patch or something and just kind of kill those off. But that's how we complete our like sterilization process of everything before we go in. And like last night, what I was doing is, because I had to blanch my tomatoes first, you boil them and then you put them in ice water and they crack. I would take the tools that I was using and dip them in that boiling water at the same time, just to kind of help clean them off and keep them going, and actually made the cleanup a lot easier when I was done. So that's something else you can use to your advantage, just kind of utilizing all those different parts. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll run, like, I have an electric kettle, and I'll run the kettle at the same time to get water boiling in case I need more hot water, so I don't slow that process down. Because, once you add a cup of cold water to hot water, it's got to reheat it. Yeah. So I just I'll eliminate that. And then when I'm done, if I didn't, then I'll make like a cup of tea or something like that and be fancy.
Yeah. So I say this, Ben has been canning all things many more years than I have. Our process differs in that I don't boil my lids anymore. And that's based on some recommendations I've read through one of the popular lid manufacturers. So I'm not saying his way is wrong, and I'm not saying my way is right. You probably will come across a difference as you're looking up recipes and such. A lot of people still do exactly as Ben does. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, that's a new development.
I'm going to move on because
I think you found that out last year.
Yeah, like maybe the last 2 years or something.
And so I don't think I've come across those lids yet.
It's definitely for newer lids versus the older ones.
I haven't come across those lids.
What do they call them? New and improved. So this is a thing I'm still working through. It's hard for me to spend time in the garden, like real work in the garden, and then also preserve that day. So Ben described kind of his workflow. There's no way. I'm no good in the evenings. I've actually processed something in like a water bath canner like 2 times because I lost track. Like I fell asleep as it was processing, like double the amount of time. So for everything, I'm the best in the morning. I'm more fresh. And so for something like tomatoes or like fruit products, like peppers and things of that nature, if I pick them the day before or earlier, it's fine. I get up at the crack of dawn and I start my canning. For other things that are maybe softer, that kind of like, if I'm preserving like collard greens, my favorite, I want to preserve, like I want to freeze them. Personally, I want to freeze them from that batch once I've cooked them and they've cooled down. I still haven't pressure canned greens yet, but it's on the list. So that's something that I would probably do like closer to same day. Definitely same day cooking. I may pick the greens on a different day. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, it's so you don't have to do all the things at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. Based on my pace, which is still a bit slower, there's only been a handful of years I've been doing this. I'm a little bit, more cautious because of concerns for safety and so on. I'm rereading steps and all of that. So it takes me quite a long time. And man, listen, if it's 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the evening, I'm ready to wrap it up for the day, So again, that's just for me and what works. I'm not as fresh. So I try to focus on doing those things first thing in the morning.
Everybody has their own time to do stuff. And my process is not your process and it may not be somebody else's, but over the years, I've kind of figured out more and more how I like to do it. Sometimes I'll do it in the middle of the day. Like if I don't have anything going on, like this week, for instance, it was crazy hot. It was like 96 degrees or something. So I'd made the decision that like the garden was on its own for the week. And, I just kind of, I did a little bit of preserving and stuff like that during the middle of the day. But there's all kinds of things that
I'll do it on lunch hour too. It's a good point. Yep.
Now, the one thing I will say that I want to get into, and I encourage other people to do, is start trying to like can sauces and condiments. So like salsas, jams, jellies, hot sauce, all that kind of stuff. I think that's something that we can add to, because you can get the stuff at the store, but sometimes you can get something that's like really your own desire. And I can think really kind of push the boundaries on like, custom is all I can think of, like you're your personalized sauce that you've made and mastered over the years. You never know. You might get a full-fledged business out of it. I mean, who knows? So just doing stuff like that. I know I want to look into doing stuff like that with some hot peppers and different salsas and whatnot. I still want to get my salsa recipe down, which I have not done well in the past few years. So last time I did it, I think I processed it too much, and it was like had the consistency of baby food, which I was not impressed with at all. I haven't eaten that stuff in a long time. You know what I mean?
I have a habanero, the hot one, habanero pepper plant. And I've seen online a kind of carrot habanero hot sauce. That's too hot of a pepper, but I'm going to try it. I'm assuming the plant will produce. There's no reason why it wouldn't. And so I'm going to try it. It's going to be hard because I'm not really going to be able to taste much of it. You know, but I have a couple of good friends that just crave that kind of hot stuff. And so I think it'll be a nice treat. That's also the balance of like, I made some pepper jelly. I watched Young Bien go through the recipe. I think the difference though is I think he was doing like pineapple or peach jelly or something. And I did straight jalapeno pepper jelly. Boy, is that thing sour. I still haven't figured out what to do with all those jars.
I'll send you a recipe for pepper jelly if you want it.
Yeah, send me one. But it also points out the difference in like small. I wish I would have gone a smaller batch of that.
Yeah, we do. When we do our pepper jelly, we put it in the small jars. And I mean, it's only got one use in our house. It's either mostly cornbread or biscuits. So, you know, that stuff lasts.
No, they're in small jars, but I mean, like, I wish I would have done like 3 or 4 jars versus I think I did like 8 jars. Right? Like, again, if it was really good, really, really good, it'd be perfect, you know, because it's going to keep a good long time, but it's, you know.
Yeah, I'll send you my recipe.
I'm kind of like hoping I come across someone that's like, oh, I loved this.
Yeah. And you know, and there's something to be said because, you know, pepper jelly is something that's like a Southern classic, but you can't buy it at the store. So, you know, we have it and we're good. And everybody I give it to, I'm like, y'all want some pepper jelly? And a lot of people around me aren't from here. And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, look, make you a batch of cornbread. Here's a jar. Let me know what you think. Hey, it's the best thing ever. Who would have thought? I'm like, I told you. It's like, it's amazing. And the thing is you can adjust that based on the way you make it to how hot you want it. So you don't have to have something crazy hot. You can have just a little bit of heat. You can change up the peppers. You can do a lot of things with it, which I think makes it really cool.
Yeah.
So, for time purposes, let's talk about storing these things. Store them in your cabinets. Once you've canned them or preserved them, store them somewhere where it's out of the sunlight. And usually there's not like an air vent inside of your like cupboard or something like that. So it'll be cooler. It'll help last, and you won't get that color that discoloration. Thank you. Discoloration that'll come along with it. So do that, and make sure that you do not reuse the tops to the cans. Every time I talk about canning and there's people that are there that can ask questions, they say, can I reuse the tops? No, you cannot. You can reuse the rings, but you cannot reuse the top to the can. That's it. Once you're done with the vegetable after you open the can, you throw it in the trash. You cannot reuse it. You cannot sterilize it and reuse it. You cannot do anything with it as far as canning goes afterwards. Make some wind chimes out of it. Throw them as ninja stars at something. I don't care, but do not put them back on your cans. I'm telling you, it's not going to work. How's that?
There's some company that has come up with some like reusable ring kind of thing. I have no experience with it, but like any of the jars you're going to get in the lids you're going to get in the stores nowadays, what he said, don't do it. That seal that you're, you know, during the canning process, that active sealing, like that's a one-time thing. And then once you break that seal, once you open that jar, that thing, it's kind of like trying to retape something. It may look like it holds, but nope.
No, and I mean, you have to pry it off, so you're kind of bending it a little bit and all that stuff. But one tip that I'll give everybody too is when you go to the store and you're looking in the canning section at the grocery store, have you ever seen those white plastic lids that go on to the cans? Get those. They are so useful because when our jars are empty, we can continue to use them for something else. And those are reusable. I mean, not for canning, but just in general, those work out really good. So that's a huge thing.
I love those. I use those almost exclusively now for the things that I freeze, because I freeze stuff in mason jars. And for those jars, now the recommendation is if something has the curved shoulder, the jar, it's not recommended for freezing. If the wide mouth ones typically now have the jar is just straight up and down. I still have some stuff that I have that was frozen in the round jars. Like the idea is that it could shatter, because it doesn't have, as it expands, it doesn't have the proper room, yada, yada, yada. Again, you could Google any of this, but I love those white plastic tops for putting on top of a mason jar and then putting that jar in the freezer versus using a lid and a ring. If I were to use a lid, I'd use an old lid. I wouldn't, again, it's going in the freezer. It's not been preserved through hot water bath canning or pressure canning.
It's not a sterile environment.
There's also this bit of
it's not a sterile environment.
My refrigerator.
No, I'm saying inside
sterile.
that can. It's not like you haven't created a sterile environment because you're not worried about stuff coming in because the freezing process will kill whatever could grow.
Yep.
Okay. So that being said, I do need to tell you guys about our wonderful sponsor for the show, the Planter app. So the Planter app is an awesome app. It tells you, it allows you to design your gardens. You can do multiple gardens. Square foot gardening is a plus for it. It's got companion and combative planting, a simple drag and drop interface, 80 plus plants and thousands of varieties to choose from with all the info you need to grow those veggies, some flowers, herbs, from transplant to harvest, when to start seeds, the ability to create custom plants and varieties. There's a growing guide with in-depth articles in it. And then also there is a new feature added that is called the Garden Summary, which I have not checked out yet, but I need to go check it out. It's available on Android and Apple, both. And it's something that is, in my garden, is invaluable. I take it every year and I compare my last year's garden to this year's. I have multiple profiles made. I break them down by bed, by section, it doesn't matter. And you just keep using it and follow. It helps me to plan my companion, which I don't necessarily follow, but I definitely follow the combative planning portion of it. And also it helps me with my crop rotations. So that is the Planter app, and you can check that out on the Apple or Android store. And it's spelled Planter. And there is a link in the description to help get you a discount on the Planter app. Ding dong. Okay, so we have a question of the day. And the question, it comes off of our Facebook group, which is the Backyard Gardens Community Garden. Said it right because it's in my hand. Ha ha. All right, so this one is it's directed for a specific region, but one of the benefits of the show is we are in 2 different regions, so we can give our own purpose of how we do this. So Ellis writes, okay, friends in the Mid-South, I still haven't cracked the onion code. This year I did intermediate day, winter sowed, and planted out the first week of March. They're only getting about half size. I'm in zone 7A. Anyone ever have better luck planting out fall onions at the same time as garlic? If so, did you do short day or neutral day? So onions that's what makes onions tough.
Getting the right
variety. The right type, I guess is the correct word, right? You have short day, intermediate day. I guess there's day neutral, which I haven't heard of. And then you have long day. So first of all, there's a map that I will post into the Backyard Gardens group. And I'll put it, if I can figure out how to do it, I'll put it on their featured section so people can see. And that'll help give you a guide based on where you live And Batavia and I were actually talking about this yesterday because we were looking at our growing recommendations from our extension services for onions, and we are totally different. Do you have yours? Do you remember, or do you have yours pulled up?
Oh, I'm trying to make a racket with this this cup. No, I can pull it up here.
So for me, my onion planting season technically starts in August, and it continues all the way until March, and then it stops. But I plant my garlic, and I'm in zone 8A. I plant my garlic around October or November, and I actually don't plant my onions roughly until this year. I did it in January, late January, and I had really good growth, or mid-January, excuse me. I had really good growth, but I planted everything backwards, so my onion harvest wasn't what I wanted it to be. But if I had planted my onions in front of my garlic instead of behind, it would have been a totally different story. So that worked out really good for me. But Batavia's got a whole different scenario, and I grow short day onions.
So the dates for me are April 9th through May 15th. And that is basically a set going in, which I assume the, what do they call it when you're actually like the transplant onions, which are different than the little bitty bulb onions. So the onion plant is what I want to grow from now on. The set is what I've grown in previous years, and it produces such a small onion, right? Because it's basically on the second year, right? The directions in my extension service notes set, but I think there's probably some room for that being the actual onion plant itself, where the green is already, connected and already grown. But April 9th through May 15th, yesterday I was shocked that it was much later than like everything else I've seen on the interweb, and so this actually pretty much lines up with what I did. I stumbled into. My onion plants didn't go in until I think it's either the 15th or the 5th of May or something. So it did bring me some relief when it comes to that. And I'm growing long day onions, and I bought those from the store because I killed like the first 2 rounds of my onions I started from seed indoor earlier this year. They were dead. But they also were selling short day onions in the stores, big box store, Home Depot. And so I'm like, I don't know. This is like not a thing you're supposed to be doing in Illinois.
No, I mean, I'm looking at the onion planting map now in Illinois. It definitely is nowhere even close to short day. So,
which also goes with it's all about the amount of daylight hours.
Yeah, it's all based on the amount of daylight. And so, Ellis, since you're listening, I know you are. You need to be growing intermediate day onions because I do know what state you're in, but I kept that quiet for privacy purposes. But there's a clearer line, and there's actually like the map that I'm going to put up there is like a hard, fast line for each one, but you can find other maps where like the edges of them are kind of blurred a little bit because there's a little bit of bleed through. But it's, once you get into planting the onions, I don't ever recommend anybody buying the little bulbs and planting them because it's like you said, they're second year onions. They're more than likely going to bolt, and then you're just you're stuck with nothing. I will say this: onion seeds, even though Batavia killed them, they're easy to grow and they don't take a lot of space. So, and the benefit of them as well is when you're growing your onion seeds, while they're still seedlings in like your grow shelf or grow area or whatever, you can continue to trim those tops so they don't ever outgrow that actual space. So they can stay in there for a really long time. So we continue to trim them. I call them give them haircuts until it's time to put them out. And then you don't really do anything else but just feed them and water them. So they can stay on your grow shelf. I think I had some on mine for almost 3 months. and they did fine. And even because of the winter here, I set them outside and they continue to grow outside. And, I would continue to give them haircuts for another couple weeks outside afterwards. So I think a guy came and bought some onion starts from me in January, and he just texted me that he got big, softball size onions off of them. So it worked out pretty good.
Yeah. My onions right now, which are probably going on 2 months old, 2 months since they planted, I transplanted the plants in, are bigger than I've ever gotten onions from sets
there you
already.
Go.
They're not done growing.
There you go.
And I think you're absolutely right. I'm disappointed in myself about how big of a deal I made onions. Like, until I killed them, they were super easy. There's a dark period in the late winter where, everything that was sitting under my lights died. That's the reason why some of the things I'm behind in some places in the garden. And unfortunately, because the onion seeds are really only viable for the 1 year, it's kind of like, well, so I sprinkled onion seeds, which I probably still will do, like in various places, just to be able to eat them as green onions, because I knew I was so late. But I'm excited about onions next year.
I'm really excited for them too, especially now that I know to plant my garlic behind them. That might help a little bit. When I pulled up my onions, everything that was on the back row was fine. Everything that was right behind the garlic was just like minuscule because it just didn't get any sun. So that was an easy fix. But just play around with that. And I would say, after you plant your garlic is generally when you should be doing it, and check with your extension services and stuff like that. Because onions can take a cold. They're pretty tough. And the thing is too, is you can get like a cup and you can plant 50 onions in a small cup, and then you can, because their roots are tough as nails, and you can like hand separate them. So you don't even need a really big space for onions. I'll take my tray and I sell, I think it's 172 cells in it, and I'll put 4 or 5 in each cell. And then I just take them, and when I sell them to people, there's a whole lot of the word sell going on. When I sell them to people, I sell them by the plug, and I'm like, look, each one is 5 onions. So, you can do the math there and take them apart as you need to. So you can really pack them into the garden as well.
My onions probably would have survived if I would have planted multis per container, because I had them in individual 6-packs, and you know how those things dry out. That's what ended up happening. So yeah, there's also, and if you're interested in it, look it up online. There's some winter varieties that I should say they are used for overwintering. Even in, I follow a lady that's in Ohio, and she has overwintered onions. I don't know that I really have that in me yet. I think I want to, kind of conquer the most optimal conditions, especially given that, again, those seeds are only going to last that 1 year. So, but just wanted to toss that in there.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a wrap-up
and I was
thing.
going to say, and based on the picture I saw, it looks like they were harvested a little bit early, but you don't want to harvest your onions until the tops literally fall over. And you gotta, before they start bulbing, you gotta feed them and feed them and feed them. And that's like the heaviest feeder you can possibly get in the garden. You've got to continuously feed those plants so that they can get enough growth to make that big bulb. Because I'm sure you're seeing with your onions, it doesn't take any amount of time for them to bulb up. That's a lot of energy that it's got to take to do it. So.
Yeah, pushing down there. How often were you feeding yours, and with what?
So I put pre-plant, that came out weird. Pre-plant fertilizer down. So I used Biotone, which is a higher nitrogen. And then I also put in blood meal in the trench that I dug in the furrow. So I put that down, which is pure nitrogen. And then about 2 to 3 weeks later, once it started to warm up a little bit, or we got a warm spell, I came back and I put more blood meal in. And then about 2 weeks after that, I started injecting fertilizer, fish fertilizer, into my drip lines and feeding them that way. And I was feeding them probably once every 2 weeks or so. And I did fall off because I got a little bit confused with this new irrigation. feeding different things. So I did fall off a little bit, and that is what contributed to my smaller onions this year. But next year I know now how to control all of that, and so I can handle it a little bit better. There you go. Okay. But if you'd like to be like Miss Ellis and send us a question, you can do it on the Backyard Gardens Community Garden on Facebook. It is completely free for you to join. Or you can become a patron. You can be an Apple subscriber, or you could just leave one on Spotify and we will answer it. There should be a question once you scroll down the episode that says leave a question and we'll answer it. There you go. Directions are pretty simple. And with that being said, I think we have learned to grow and grow for change.
See ya.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Backyard Gardens podcast.
If you like what we're doing and you want to continue to support the podcast, head over to our Patreon page to sign up.
You can also make a one-time donation using PayPal. Both of these links are in the description.
With your support, we can continue growing and helping others in their gardens. See ya.
If you guys want some Backyard Gardens gear,
go to the link below and check out our t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other gear.
All purchases go towards helping to support the show, so thank you so much in advance, and we hope you enjoy. We want everybody to have a garden, and we're going to give you a chance to win free seeds every month.
Head over to backyardgardenstv.com and enter your email address to be entered in all of our giveaways.
Good luck.
We want you to be a part of our gardening community. DM us a picture of your garden at Backyard Gardens TV on Instagram, and we will share it with our listeners.